As soon as we walked up to it, it went on.
You weren't ready yet
Well, no, I mean, it was just amazing, but it shows all.
for what, 50 minutes or something like that? I don't even remember. I remember going.
Yeah, wasn't that, yeah.
Okay, I've got 6 o'clock. So I will go ahead and call the meeting to order, and I invite everyone to call the meeting to order. The City of Ione Planning Commission, I invite everyone to stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And so today, the Ione Planning Commission, we have a public hearing on the agenda today, and we'll go ahead and start with our roll call. Sorry,
Okay. Commissioner Paliti,
Here.
Commissioner Gephardt,
Here.
Commissioner Bukala, and then Vice Chairman Wiley,
Present.
and Chairman Hoyska.
present.
Thank you.
And so do we have an approval of our agenda today?
So move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we approve, and I don't see a presentation or announcement on the agenda, but what we'll do is move on to our public comment period. And at this time, this will be the public comment portion that's limited to 4 minutes for items not appearing on the agenda. So I just do want to mention, we will open the hearing, and at that time, we will go ahead and open for comments specific to that. But at this time, this will be items not on the agenda. Does anyone have a comment at this time?
Mark Kressner, 111 East Main Street. I just kind of wanted to get an update about, there's a project over here on 31 Main Street. And it was put on hold, and they put a stop work order on it because there were some questions because it didn't come before you guys. And it was okay and pushed through, but they put a stop work order on it because it was supposed to come back before you guys. Because there were some questions about parking, zoning, different things. So I was wondering, is that going to be on a future agenda, or are you guys aware of that or anything? I know our city manager is, but I'm wondering.
It will come back to the planning commission,
Oh, okay.
and there is a stop work order. There should be no work activity whatsoever. Yeah, it will come back to the planning
Okay.
commission.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments at this time? And if no further comments, we'll go ahead and close the public comment portion, and we will proceed with opening the public hearing. Today, this is going to be a zoning code amendment project, which includes revisions to address requirements of state law pertaining to a variety of housing types and to make minor revisions to improve implementation. And at this time, the public is invited to make comment on the zoning code amendment project. Oh, I'm sorry, before we have any public comment. Okay, I'm sorry. We'll do our report first, and then we'll.
And Janice is just getting it so we can screen share here. I want to make it pop up on the screen so everyone can see the revisions. So just a moment here while we get our screen sharing sorted out. So. All participants, just say all. Oh. Okay. Let's give it one more try. Yeah, there we go. All right, Chair and members of the commission, it is a pleasure to be back with you this evening. So the item before you is a relatively minor series of amendments to the zoning code. So we're recommending that the planning commission receive the staff report and presentation of the zoning code amendments, take public comment, and then make a recommendation to the city council regarding adoption of the zoning code amendments. And these are basically a couple of cleanups that we identified while we were going through the housing element update. So tables 17.22.030-1 and 17.24.030-1, so two different tables, the residential and the non-residential use tables, would be revised to treat residential care homes, supportive housing, and transitional housing in the same manner as residential uses in the same zone. So this is just consistent with the requirements of state law. If you have a residential care home, a supportive housing unit, or a transitional housing unit that's proposed as a single family home, it has to just be processed as a single family home. Similarly, if they're proposed as multifamily development, they have to be processed in the same manner as multifamily development. So subject to all the same standards and requirements as the same uses in the same zone. Section 17.116.040 would be revised to allow emergency shelters as an accessory use to churches and places of worship. So where you have a church or a place of worship, they could request to provide an emergency shelter for homeless persons on their property with an administrative site plan review. And then lastly, section 17.116.050 would be revised to specify that transitional housing is permitted consistent with state law. So these are the revisions before you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Beth, I had one after reading this earlier. Being slightly silly, easier to understand this way. Mike comes over to my house every Wednesday night, and we have a Bible study. Is my house a place of worship?
Are you a 501c3 or a church? You're probably not a place of worship unless you're an actual church religious use
That makes sense, but on a legal sense is what I'm talking about. Is there a definition someplace of what a place of worship is? Because that could be so widely construed.
That is a great question. We did not add a definition, and we can definitely do that. And we can just make it consistent with any definitions in state law related to this type of use. There's the Federal Freedom of Religion Act.
The type of use, and also the fact that it's a fixed piece of real estate or something.
That makes sense.
It's not just up in the sky.
Well, churches are tax exempt from property tax, so I would take a guess that you're not a church because you pay property taxes. We'd like you to continue to pay your property tax. Churches have to be a 501c3. They can't, I mean, they are exempt from property tax, but they have to prove their exemption. It's not a simple process.
Well, Mike, I'm not questioning church. I think we
Yeah.
all know what that is.
Yeah.
But I think we need a definition for a place of worship. Because
Well,
that,
there is one.
And-
We'll dig it out. There
Yeah,
is one.
We can make sure that it's
Yeah.
specified in the zoning code itself, because there
Yeah.
definitely are definitions.
Yeah.
We just did not specify that.
okay.
Yes, we can add those definitions before it goes to the city council. If
I have a question for Beth. Could you tell me just what all transitional and supportive housing entails? I understand, like, care homes, this and that. Would like halfway house kind of thing fall under that, or?
let me just pop up the quick definition, because they're not necessarily a halfway house. There's very specific definitions for these uses. It's like they're trying to get the people that are currently in that situation into permanent housing. Yes. Of it is, but. And these are both, this is already defined in the zoning code, so let me just. Let's see, so. A moment while I get to the definitions, which of course they're at. Alright, so. And these are both transitional and supportive housing are both uses that are related to persons transitioning from homelessness to a permanent living environment. So I'll go through transitional housing first. As I scroll to the T's. I apologize. We seem to have moved our definition. Here we go. So transitional housing is housing that provides supportive services for up to 24 months. So there's a limit on the length of time that residents of transitional housing may live there. And it has to be exclusively designated and targeted for recently homeless persons. So it's basically housing set aside for homeless persons that provide supportive services. And it can be typically buildings that are configured as rental housing. So it provides just individual units for individual persons or households. And then supportive housing is housing that doesn't have a limit on a length of stay. It has to be specifically occupied by what is called a target population. So a population that was recently homeless. And then it also has to be linked to on-site or off-site healthcare services and other services that are assistive. So it has to provide, once again, links to people. So basically it provides temporary housing and provides links to services. So it assists people in transitioning from being homeless to finding permanent housing and provides that support necessary. So it's a longer term option than supportive housing, since supportive housing has a limit on the length of stay.
And just to be 100% clear on this, these updates are really strictly to comply with state law.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
We're making sure that the housing element will be consistent with state law when the state reviews it. So we're wanting to get those zoning changes in advance.
Thank you.
I have a question on a specific type of emergency shelter,
Okay.
okay? And please, I don't want to offend anybody, but what would happen if somebody tried to pull a Martha's Vineyard deal on Ione and bring in, 3 busloads of immigrants? Then like I said, I'm not trying to offend anybody or, the touchy subject, but what is an emergency shelter?
So an emergency shelter is basically provides for housing for up to 6 months, and it doesn't provide around the clock housing typically. It typically closes during the daytime hours and is open in the evening hours. Emergency shelters are allowed by right in the light industrial zone, I believe, and then allowed with a use permit in several other zones. An emergency shelter has to meet very specific standards. And then the city can also limit the number of beds per emergency shelter. So someone would have to come in, file an application for an emergency shelter and meet all of the standards in the zoning code. And to be able to build an emergency shelter or to convert a use to emergency shelters. And the city has to be able to demonstrate in its housing element that it can accommodate its currently unhoused homeless population. The city has a pretty small unhoused population. So if you had 40 or 50 the need for 40 or 50 beds be identified, that would very likely be above and beyond what the city's unhoused population is or the city's fair share of regional needs. So I don't see that there would be a path for that to have an administrative approval. They could definitely apply for a conditional use permit and come, before the planning commission for consideration.
Okay. And as far as churches go, I mean, can they provide emergency shelter?
They would be able to with the change that's being recommended, and that would allow them
So
to.
they still would have to go through the same, so.
They would, to be approved by right, they would have to meet all the standards. If they wanted to have a larger, different type of shelter, they would have to request a use permit.
Okay. And the other question I had on the map, okay? I don't know if I'm getting ahead of us.
I think we're a little ahead on
Yeah,
the
Get
map.
ahead of, oh,
A few more items down the
Yeah.
agenda.
And I just to emphasize the discussion about the emergency shelter, it looks like part of the ordinance, it is in the exhibits is that it is not it's very limited zoning in which it would be permitted. And if permitted, it would require a administrative site plan review or a conditional use permit. So I just wanted to emphasize that it does look like there's very narrow
mhm.
zoning, but it is, the emergency shelter is definitely the one that seems, to have some of the applications that are for discussion. So, okay.
And the city has not received any emergency shelter applications.
Beth, I'm presuming, and very well could be wrong about this, that there must be some number involved. I mean, we're not gonna put people in every manufacturing zone within the city limits. And does Irina, if I'm saying the word right, does that require a certain number of approved units?
So the capacity, the maximum capacity is that an individual facility shall not exceed a maximum of 40 persons served nightly. And that's actually fairly high. You could probably reduce that. I would have to look at your current housing element, but you could probably reduce that to 20 or 25. So yeah, that would be the limitation on the size. In terms of the number of parcels, multiple people, multiple applicants could come in and request an emergency shelter by right that meets the size standards.
Well, I was actually asking the other end of it. Is there a requirement? Is Housing and Community Development, when they do their review this next spring, is there a requirement that we have a certain amount of acreage or parcels or?
It's not quite like the RENA where you have to demonstrate as a specific capacity, but you do have to identify that you have adequate sites that can reasonably be expected to develop with an emergency shelter that are designated, in this case, the M1 or M2 for an administrative approval. And the city does not have a huge amount of M1 and M2.
So there's no
sites.
empirical number. There's a subjective, do we have adequacy?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or board discussion? Are we comfortable opening up for public comment at this time or any other? Okay, all right, then at this time, we will go ahead and open up for public comment for the topic that we're on with the zoning change. So we'll go ahead and open up the comment period.
On the transitional housing, is it, now what zoning that apply to, is that any residential or? Open, like say if I'm gonna open a transitional housing, what's the zoning requirements on that? I mean, is it residential, is it commercial transitional, what is that?
Do you want to take comments and then have me respond after all the public comments have been received?
Yeah, let's do that, just so we're kind of a little more informational period. Otherwise, yeah, we kind of get into that back and forth. So we'll go ahead and, do you have anything further, Mark, or otherwise?
No, I was just curious.
Yeah.
You know.
We'll let Beth. Okay, so yeah.
And I've
And then-
noted it, so I'll just.
Okay, are there any other questions at this time? And then I'm just assuming we have no one on Zoom. Okay, so I think that's it then. Okay, yeah, thank you, Beth.
So regarding the transitional housing
Right,
question,
I mean,
allowed in any zone that residential uses are allowed, and it has to be treated in the same manner as a residential use of the same type. So it would be allowed wherever residential uses are allowed.
and then I think you indicated earlier, if it was multifamily, if it was single, all those same components apply. It looked like to me, it's the same. Only the restrictions applicable to the type of the dwelling unit is what it looks like. And that's that's for the transitional housing as well as the supportive housing, it looks like. The emergency shelter is a little bit different, but
Correct.
okay. Okay. Okay, and if there's no further comments and do we have any more discussion? Okay, then the recommendation is or we're supposed to make a recommendation to City Council regarding adopting the zoning code amendment. So I think we've made some comments that we wanted to have included and some clarifications.
Correct.
But we did have a draft of the ordinance or the resolution, I'm sorry, but did I have anyone that was seeking to make a motion at this time with that resolution? The ordinance is attached. I don't know if we need to read it aloud, but.
I would move that we adopt resolution 2202-2 with the addition of or clarification rather of things that we discussed on place of worship.
Definitions, I think.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion made. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll go ahead and all in favor, say aye. Do we need to do a roll call of the public hearing? I think maybe we should have okay, we'll go ahead and do a roll call approval. I won't make us all do a yay. Let's start with Commissioner Bucala. I'll do a roll call of the aye or no on
Okay.
the, yeah.
Aye.
Okay, Commissioner Gebhardt, you.
Aye.
I will be an aye as well.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we approve resolution 2202-2, a resolution of the City of Ione Planning Commission recommending that the city council adopt an ordinance amending the Ione Municipal Code Title 17 zoning to adopt the zoning code amendments. Okay, so now we can move to our second agenda item, and that's where we'll have our maps. This is the countywide sixth cycle housing element update study session, and we will also have a staff report and presentation that Beth will present. Thank you.
Yes, and just 1 minute while I get the correct thing to show up on the screen here. So that people in the audience as well as people on Zoom can see it. All right. So this is the countywide sixth cycle draft housing element. This is a workshop. So tonight the commission is not being asked to make any decisions, just to take public comment. And if you have any informal comments on that housing element, definitely make those at this time, but you're not being asked to recommend anything to city council for adoption. So the housing element is a requirement of state law. So I'll just quickly cover some of the basics regarding housing elements. And you probably recall we had a workshop a year and a half or so ago talking about the general plan update and the housing element. So the housing element is one of the mandated elements of the general plan, and it specifically addresses housing needs and constraints within Amador County and its local cities. So this is a housing element that's being prepared at the countywide level. So it includes information for the city of Ione, as well as all of the other jurisdictions in the county. And then there's an annex to the housing element for each jurisdiction that identifies conditions specific to each jurisdiction. So there's an Ione annex to the housing element. So every local government in the state, all cities, all counties, all towns are required to update their housing element on a regular basis. And they have to be updated more frequently than the remaining general plan elements. So the city of Ione and Amador County are on an 8-year cycle. So the housing element's updated every 8 years. And the housing element establishes the city's housing policies and programs. It meshes with the land use element quite a bit in terms of identifying where housing can be built, but it doesn't necessarily establish the land use map. It references the land use map and it references zoning provisions that are identified to accommodate housing. So the city, as well as the county and all of the other cities in the county, will each adopt the housing element separately. So even though it includes policies and programs related to all jurisdictions, each jurisdiction must adopt it independently for it to be implemented at the local level. So what's in the housing element update? It has the housing plan, which is the briefer section of the housing element. And this includes the goals, policies, and programs that the city will implement during the 8-year cycle of the housing element. So this will be implemented throughout the 6th cycle. And the housing plan has to meet a lot of requirements of state law. Some of the primary ones are to ensure that there is adequate land available in the city to meet the city's housing needs. Another is to ensure that the city has programs to facilitate affordable, market rate, and special needs housing development, as well as housing rehabilitation and maintenance and preservation of existing affordable housing. The housing plan also addresses and reduces governmental constraints on housing development, which are basically development standards and requirements that the city places on development that may make it more difficult to develop either certain types of housing or housing in general. So where those constraints are significant or undue or may constrain the city from accommodating either its RHNA or a variety of housing types, the housing plan includes programs to address those. And it also, this cycle has a new requirement to affirmatively further fair housing. So there is a much more detailed set of programs and actions that address ensuring fair housing actions during the 6th cycle. The lengthier part of the housing element is the background report. And this is basically similar to an existing conditions report. It has a lot of data regarding conditions in the county as well as conditions in each of the jurisdictions. It includes an introduction that summarizes what's in the background report, a housing needs assessment, which provides a lot of demographic data, a lot of housing data, population data, et cetera. a housing constraints and resources discussion, and this really focuses on constraints to housing development. In the main section of the background report, it focuses on non-governmental constraints such as the cost of land, availability of financing, interest rates, things like that, that affect housing development. And then in the individual annexes, it focuses on the constraints specific to a jurisdiction. And this section also identifies resources available for housing, which are primarily financial resources available at the state and federal levels to assist with housing production. The inventory of residential sites chapter identifies the sites available to accommodate housing. The affirmatively furthering fair housing chapter addresses the specific requirements related to ensuring that the city is accommodating all types of housing, all persons, and that people have equal opportunities to live where they wish within the city. And then lastly, there's an evaluation of the 2014 to 2019 housing elements. And this is a little unusual of an evaluation because the city of Ione, Jackson, and Sutter Creek had a group of policies and programs. Amador County had a group of policies, and then Plymouth had separate ones, and Amador City hadn't updated its housing element. So there's a kind of odd array of programs there, but it evaluates each jurisdiction's implementation of the programs as well as the countywide efforts to implement programs. As I'd mentioned, there's a series of annexes, which are at the rear of the housing element that address jurisdiction-specific governmental constraints and also include the inventory of residential sites, including a map of the residential sites for each jurisdiction. So looking at planning for housing at the countywide level, and these workshops are being conducted by individual cities as well as several of the counties. So the announcements for these did invite people throughout the county to attend. So if you get any comments that aren't related specifically to Ione, it's because it's a countywide effort. So going back to why we're doing this. So the State Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, assesses and plans for housing needs for jurisdictions where there are jurisdictions with a regional council of governments, such as in the Bay Area, where you have the Association of Bay Area Governments, or ABEG. Those regional housing needs are distributed to that larger body, which then develops methodology to distribute the regional housing needs to all of their member jurisdictions. In the case of Amador County, there is not a regional council of governments. So the state actually develops the regional housing need allocation and distributes that to the county in each of the jurisdictions. So that's determined at the state level in this case. And the regional housing needs allocation is the number of housing units that the city must plan to accommodate during the sixth cycle. So countywide, there's a regional housing need allocation of 741 units. And these are broken down by income level. So the allocation for the very low income level is for households that earn less than half of the area median income, which is the countywide median income, or about $97,441 for a 4-person household. Lower income households are households that earn 50 to 80% of the area median income. I'm sorry, that was really the wrong income. I was like, that seems really high. The very low income, 0 to 50% of the area median income, the income range is up to about $40,000 with an affordable rental rate of about $663 a month, or an affordable purchase price of about $97,441. That's the very low income group. The lower income group earns from 50 to 80% of the area median income. So for a 4-person household, that equates to about $62,950. And a rental rate of $984 and a housing cost of about $147,000. The moderate income group is households that earn from 80% to 120% of the area median income, or up to about $94,450. And then lastly, the above moderate income group is all households that earn above the moderate income level. So all households earning more than 120% of the area median income. So the inventory of sites to accommodate each jurisdiction's RHNA has to be land that's entitled for residential, or not entitled, but land that is planned to be available. So it's designated by the general plan and zoned by the zoning code to accommodate residential development. This can be residential only districts or districts that allow a mix of uses, including residential. For the very low and low income sites, those sites have to be 1/2 to 10 acres in size. If they're larger or smaller, you have to demonstrate that the city's had success with those size parcels in the 5th cycle. And then they also have to meet default density assumptions. So in the city of Ione and all the cities in Amador County, in order to accommodate the very low and low income need, densities have to be at least 15 dwelling units per acre or more. And so in Ione, what this means is that the city has to accommodate about 30 very low income units, 20 low income units, 25 moderate income units, and 42 above moderate income units, or a total of 117 units from 2021 through 2029. And the city's capacities for about 808 units. There's more capacity. There's a lot of land in the city, a lot of large parcels in the city that are designated and identified in the general plan to accommodate residential growth. So there's more capacity, but a lot of those parcels aren't realistically expected to develop during the sixth cycle. And further, the 808, all of those parcels aren't expected to develop during the sixth cycle either. Those just identify a variety of locations where the units could be developed. So going through the housing plan, which was what I had mentioned as being the portion of the housing element that's the implementable portion, it addresses 4 primary goals: a goal of housing diversity to ensure that adequate sites are available to accommodate the identified housing needs and encourage a diversity of housing types affordable to a range of income levels. The second goal, H2, housing and neighborhood preservation and improvement. This focuses on addressing, conserving, rehabilitating, and enhancing existing neighborhoods and housing stock. Goal H3 for fair housing, which promotes access to decent housing and a quality living environment for all Amador County residents. And goal H4, advancing opportunities, which promotes providing a range of affordable and special needs housing opportunities. And associated with each of these goals is a set of policies and programs. And I'll just hit some of the more significant programs. There's a lot of programs that are included to meet very specific requirements of state law. So the first program is to ensure that coordination between the county and the cities to implement the housing element continues through a countywide housing working group. So this would just be a group that meets regularly to ensure that the housing element is being implemented and to be able to continue checking off the actions that are completed. A lot of the actions can be accomplished by the jurisdiction sending out a joint mailing or jointly noticing a lot of developers or other parties. And so every jurisdiction doesn't necessarily need to do this individually. So this allows the jurisdictions to work together and have some efficiency of time and staff efforts by providing some cost savings and time sharing between jurisdictions. Program 3 ensures that the city will have adequate sites, and each jurisdiction has to maintain sites to accommodate the RHNA, the Regional Housing Need Allocation, throughout the planning period. What this means is if the city wants to redesignate or rezone sites, we have to go through and calculate and make sure that there's still enough sites remaining to accommodate the RHNA. So it just ensures that cities maintain that inventory and don't make decisions that would take away a portion of the inventory or the sites that are needed to accommodate the RHNA. Program 4 encourages the development of accessory dwelling units, junior accessory dwelling units, and SB9 units. Program 6 provides for affordability targets, and specific to Ione, this would apply to some of the special planning areas in Ione and identifying affordability targets. So as future residential development comes forward in those areas, you would expect those developments to have a specific amount of affordable units, and this would be implemented following adoption of the housing element. Program 9 provides for affordable and special needs housing assistance and incentives. So this would encourage and support the development of affordable and special needs housing. Program 10 is for preservation of existing affordable housing. So these are existing subsidized units and just taking steps to ensure that those remain part of the city's housing stock and remain affordable. Program 13 provides for affirmatively furthering fair housing. Program 17 is development code and zoning code amendments. Some of the jurisdictions have a lengthy list of amendments that need to be made as their zoning codes have not been updated in quite a while. Ione only has one item that we've included. And we could have wrapped this up with the changes tonight, but we didn't want to look too perfect when it got submitted to the state because they like to see that jurisdictions are making changes. So we left the change in for parking requirements for mixed use developments to be developed for the zoning code, and then also providing for shared parking between residential and non-residential uses when those are proposed as part of the same project. So if there's uses that would have more daytime parking demand versus nighttime parking demand, allowing for that kind of balance between the parking. So the timeline for the housing element update, the public review draft housing elements available now, and it's through January 2023. Initially, the comment period was slated to end tomorrow, December 14th, but it's been extended to January 9th. So if anyone has comments, feel free to submit those comments anytime between now and January 9th. So that 30-day public review period that's mandated has actually been bumped up to about just under 60 days. Following receipt of the public comments, the document will be revised to address the public comments. So a matrix will be developed that summarizes the comments, identifies the changes made to the housing element, and those changes will be made in both track changes and then as a clean copy, so people can go through and see how the housing element was revised. That draft will be submitted to the State Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, for its 90-day review period. So they have a really long review period. Following their review, we'll get a letter of findings and we'll then make changes to the housing element to address those findings. And the revised housing element then goes to the Planning Commission for consideration and a recommendation to council, then to the council for adoption, then back to the state for another review period, 60 days this time. Following that review period, we may get more findings and we may have to make revisions to the housing element, or we may not. That in the past cycles, it was rare that additional revisions needed to be made. We usually addressed all of the state's comments during their review period. This cycle, they're requiring, they have a higher bar and more changes are being required, and we're seeing findings letters still on the second submittal. So you may see it twice, hopefully not, but just as a forewarning. So the county has information related to the housing element update on its webpage, and the city also has information related to the update on the city's webpage. So you can visit either place to find information about the housing element update. Regarding submittal of written comments, those should be submitted to Chuck Beatty, the Amador County Planning Director, who's handling the receipt of comments for all the jurisdictions countywide. And those can be mailed at the address shown on the screen or emailed to Chuck. So either way of submitting comments is fine. And if people do submit comments directly to the city, we'll just forward them to the county to be collated and combined with all of those countywide comments. So with that, I will stop talking and let you ask any questions you have.
Beth, does the fact that there is no enclosures indicate that there has been no communication from the public regarding the housing element?
Is the fact that there's what? No, I'm sorry. Could you
Does
repeat?
that mean there has been no submittals by the public about this when they thought it was going to head in tomorrow?
I think the county's received about 3 comment letters, so not very many. No, and then a couple of the jurisdictions, Plymouth, Sutter Creek, and Amador City, were having a difficult time scheduling their meetings during the 30-day review period. So they had asked that it could be extended. So in the spirit of working together, all jurisdictions agreed to do that. So we'll see if we get some more comments between now and then.
Anybody else? Okay, the map.
We're not there yet.
I know, I think that's
That's,
item
We
3.
we have 2 map items on the agenda tonight. We have the inventory of sites map that's part of the housing element in the Ione annex, but we also separately for the next agenda item have the land use map.
Oh, that's not on the second agenda?
It's the third.
Third agenda, oh, I'm sorry.
No, we have two study sessions on the, so yeah, no, I totally get it. But yeah, no, I didn't have a lot of comment. I'm glad to hear that the period is still open, and I'm gonna try to go through it in more detail and appreciate hearing that. I was kind of like, oh man, it's closing tomorrow. So anyways, yeah, no other comments, I think though. So yeah, let's move to our focus general plan update.
Public comment.
Study session. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. We still have to do public, sorry. We still have to take public comment on this portion for our the housing element portion. So we'll open to public comment. We have Gary.
Hello, Gary Thomas, resident, 125 Maple Street, Ione, California. Who sets that number for the Ione? It looks like Ione's getting a pretty good share of the numbers that you had there. We started at 30, there was an 808, I didn't get that.
And I'll just note all the comments and then respond at the end, but yes.
And then, does the affordable housing include the ability to get affordable insurance these days? Some of us are in a high fire zone and not able to get insurance so readily. And that goes for the south area, not just this area here along the creek. And the fair housing plan is anything but fair for insurance. So I think that when you add everything up, including the insurance rates going up, I think that you're gonna see a lot of what you thought was affordable is now maybe not so affordable. So I would like you guys to make sure about that number. Thank you.
Good point. Yeah. Any other comments or questions? Okay.
I'll just answer those questions then. The RENA is set by the state. So the state allocates the units between Ione and all of the jurisdictions. Jackson has a higher overall regional housing need allocation, and then the unincorporated county has the bulk of the allocation. So the city's allocation is fairly commensurate with the city's population. Regarding the affordable housing, whether that includes the ability to get affordable insurance, there are a couple of different considerations taken into account when we're looking at the affordability of housing. If we're looking at rental housing, typically the developer would include that cost of insurance as part of their overall pro forma. And as they're assessing the amount of assistance they need to develop that housing, that assistance would be eligible and would become kind of part of their baseline. So that additional cost of insurance wouldn't be carried forward to the renter. They would just pay the maximum amount of rent allowed under state law. For an individual housing unit, so the housing units have to be sold at an affordable housing price, and a number of assumptions are made in setting those sales prices related to insurance and other costs. So there's definitely the possibility, especially if somebody buys a unit 1 year and then they get an insurance adjustment the next year, that unit could become less and less affordable over time as property taxes increase and as insurance increases. So that unit, a for sale unit, is harder to maintain as an affordable unit sometimes.
I'm not sure. You see, the state sets these numbers. What do they look at and how? I mean, is it just what we have to build? Is it new stuff? Or do they look at, like, which to me would be relevant, but almost impossible to figure out, what actual rents are being charged?
So they look at a number of factors. They look at the total amount of development projected in the county during that regional housing need allocation period. So they look at that. They also look at the number of units that may have been lost during the fifth cycle and may need to be replaced. But this is particularly significant in areas that had large disasters, such as large wildfires or flooding incidents, where they lost a significant portion of their housing stock. That would be added back in. And then they look at vacancy rates and other factors. When they look at individual jurisdictions, they also look at the census data regarding the affordability of the housing stock. So they do take into account the existing amount of very low income housing that exists in a jurisdiction to ensure that jurisdictions aren't receiving more than their fair share of affordable units, and also conversely ensuring that jurisdictions that have a lot of already affordable housing are receiving their commensurate share of above market rate units to balance that out. So they do look at the mix of affordable versus non-affordable units in each jurisdiction.
Do you have any idea if they looked, like, specifically at Ione? And a good part of the town is in the floodplain. And so some people have to pay flood insurance and some don't. Do they look at anything like that?
I don't believe they did, because the methodology I saw did not include anything that documented the review of environmental constraints for any of the jurisdictions.
They just make a general guess.
I think they anticipate that if you have a lot of land in the floodplain or land that's not developable, then you'll identify other sites to accommodate the need.
That's all.
That's a delicate question. I'm trying to figure out how I want to pose this. I thank you. I feel there's a proverbial elephant in the middle of the room that we haven't talked about. Are we doing anything in these proceedings that would help create what we all don't want, a tent city situation like we see all over our state? Are we doing anything that would enable that? Are we doing anything that would encourage that?
I don't think there's anything in the housing element that would encourage an unhoused population in Ione. No, not that I can think of.
Glad to hear that.
I'd like to see, what kind of a developer or a developer that could come in and afford to build these low-cost, affordable housing. That's, it doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense at all.
And typically that housing requires a lot of subsidies. So those developers go to the state for California Tax Credit Allocation Committee tax credits. And they go back to the state for a lot of subsidies. They also turn to local jurisdictions to see if there's funding assistance available. Some jurisdictions have funding sources and some do not.
You want to take one more public comment?
We can go ahead and, yeah, I think we've had some discussion. We'll open back up public comment period.
Mark Preston, on East Main Street. I just had a quick question. Now, the low income housing, does that include the ADU units in those, or? I know Ione has several of those. The state has opened it up so anybody can actually build an ADU on the property. Does that include that as well, ADU units? For the low income?
Is that the only question we have? Okay. Larry, did you? We're going to go ahead and try to get all the questions in.
Okay. So yes and no. So as ADUs are constructed, they can be counted toward the RHNA, but the city has not had a significant amount of ADUs constructed during the fifth cycle or last 3 years that are designated as low income units, so that we can only assume the same proportion that's currently been constructed would be constructed in the future, unless the city were to take really strenuous measures to encourage and support the development of ADUs. And the city does take a number of measures to support ADUs. We have the ADU assistance guide, we have a number of things, but the state's looking for a huge leap forward to
Yeah, like
increase
a
the
measurable
assumption.
data
Right.
point. Right.
Well, our homes out in Castle Oaks, the last three series of builds, they are considered a semi handicap accessible. Okay, because it would, this is what I was told. I don't know if it's true, but it's the matter of 4 inches of a threshold. Okay, so you may know the building codes and what have you, but that's why these houses were built like that. So God forbid you had to put a ramp in, or somebody in the family was wheelchair bound or something, that could be. So.
I'd like to know if you still low-income housing, like a Ringer Ranches, and we could put, say they gotta build 15 in there, and they gotta build them. All it takes is you guys planners to say that, because they can low inside their houses. They can make them all look like they have the same outside, but the inside, they put cheaper stuff in them, if I'm correct still. And they could use them as low-income housing. And that's legal to do, and we don't do that. We try and put one gob in one place, so I got a slum area. And I don't see that. It should be spread out throughout the city. It shouldn't be just one area to trap, like the Ringer Ranch. You have no place near multiple family dwellings. You don't have any plans for that, and that's in the city limits. You got plans in everywhere else in the city, but the Ringer Ranch has nothing. That's special designation. How come it ain't planned out? You're supposed to plan that out, not the developer. Thank you. Am I correct about the housing?
And I'm-
low income?
And I'll respond to that. So where we have larger scale developments that are expected to occur with like a master plan subdivision, we don't, and we can't assume that a certain amount of that will be affordable housing unless we have a specific parcel that's identified, or we have a development proposal that actually includes that. So this goes back to the, let me scroll back here. This goes back to program. Let's pass right by it. Okay. There we go. program, 6 affordability targets, where we would go through all of the planned development areas in the city and identify targets for those so that they do provide their fair share of affordable housing. So, yeah. Affordability targets.
So we can, when this, if and when this comes up, we can pretty much do what Larry was saying.
Yes, this would provide the vehicle for the city to do that.
Kind
the
of
city-
along the lines of that they couldn't build anymore at Wildflower until they built the, off ramp off of the highway. Instead of it, as opposed to what Larry's talking about, we just set aside a piece of property that's for low income and then they never do anything with it.
Right,
They
and
just build the other.
yeah, that is a problem. And sometimes when you have an affordability requirement, they may dedicate land and not build it. Sometimes it won't, the project won't be feasible if they actually construct those units. And so we have to ensure that any requirements that we have alternatives for the developer, or if they can actually demonstrate that it's not feasible, that the requirement can be reduced or waived. So we do have to be careful with how that requirement is provided. But in most jurisdictions, you can successfully get the units constructed in tandem, concurrently with the development. We will definitely bring that back to the body. And then a lot of jurisdictions have an inclusionary housing ordinance that's part of their zoning code. The city has a policy in the housing element that's really not had a lot of success in being implemented because there haven't been a lot of development projects. But by putting it in the zoning ordinance, you can have more specificity and ensure that as every project comes forward, they provide their fair share of affordable units, which generates a substantial amount of affordable housing when you have times of a lot of development. The only downside of that is that HCD doesn't allow those units to be counted toward the inventory. They can count toward the RENA as they're developed, but when you're identifying your adequate sites, you still have to identify those higher density sites unless those units are currently proposed. So they're not as useful in getting HCDs, a reduction in the inventory, knowing that those units would come forward.
Okay.
Any other comments or discussion?
One thing that we're gonna have to be really careful with this, I tell you, because, we're back to developers paying their fair share. Okay, we're overtaxed on our sewer treatment plant. We've got, a lot of stuff that needs to be taken care of, and the Ione taxpayer can't keep that burden on their shoulder. And I don't know how the hell you're gonna find a developer to come in and build low income housing and provide what they should be providing for the city, that's been passed over the last 30 years. I don't know.
And
So,
we expect
what are we gonna do, kids?
we do expect to include new language in the general plan to strengthen that requirement, and then also to include regular reviews of the city's development impact fees, because the city's going through the effort of reviewing its development impact fees. And that's really where you get a lot of those fees and a lot of that funding, especially when we're looking at by right projects that are required to be approved at the ministerial level, where if they meet all of their requirements, they have to be approved. Those don't go through a discretionary process where you can have a development agreement, where you can have various amenities provided by the developer and negotiate payment of various fees. Those projects typically have a much more streamlined process. And so looking at just ensuring that that type of project also pays its fair share and doesn't slip through any cracks is definitely important.
Because I could see, just like Larry was saying, the low income house, then they start building houses with, Coleman camp stoves. 3/16 sheetrock, how are we gonna control that? Where are we gonna go with that one?
The units would have to be constructed to the California building code, so they would have to meet all code requirements.
And we're presuming everything is a house. And I believe that a lot of low-income requirements are met with multifamily construction.
True.
That's the way you get the price down to fit the chart. You can't. Nobody can build a 1,200 square foot house and market it for what it would cost. But you can build an apartment and rent it out and it'll count towards the number.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the 1,200 square foot house because 2 years ago, the 1,200 square foot house in Wildflower was considered the most affordable housing in the state of California at the
Really?
time. That has since changed. But that's changed all over the state. That $345,000 house 2 years ago is now $445,000 to $450,000 in the space of less than 2 years. But at the time, we had the most affordable brand new housing in the state of California when they started some of those units in Wildflower. So yes, multifamily homes or apartment complexes can be, they're definitely considered affordable housing. The problem right now is that developers make more money with single family construction. So the fine line, and Mr. Polidi's comments are very on target in terms of the fine line is charging enough in development impact fees so that the city gets in return what it should get from the impact of development. And that's the whole point of the fee. But the balancing act is if the development impact fees are really high, then the cost of the house goes up. So it's all about finding that exact spot where you get enough in development impact fees, but not so much that the cost of the house is not competitive for the market that you're in. I can guarantee you our development impact fees are not too high. In fact, they're the lowest fees you will find anywhere in the state of California. And so that's a good thing because we can raise the fees without losing any competition or losing the burden that is put on the actual cost of that house when it goes up in the market, at whatever point in time it goes on the market. But finding that balance is really important because we don't want to undersell the city's needs, parks, firehouses, police stations, and so forth, or just general government needs, parks, all of the things that the city wants when we have the impact of a brand new subdivision. And these subdivisions aren't small. We're talking about 39 units just for one single village, right? So we're talking about hundreds of homes over the space of 5 years, 10 years. So you're right. We should be charging or at least negotiating something that's fair, either through a development agreement or in the development impact fees or in both places, and balancing those things out in both places. Some cities just make the developer build a school or build a fire station or build a library or instead of paying a fee. And the end result's the same. You get what you need. So there are lots of ways to do it. And I think you're right. We want to be really sure the next time we do any kind of development agreement that we get out of it what we believe are fair impacts, which includes streets and streetlights and traffic lights and stops and traffic signals and all the things that are impacted by new development. And in the past, to be really honest, we haven't done a great job of that as a city. We have given away the store to developers. I think everyone would agree with that. All 5 council members would agree with that. All the staff would agree with that. So I'm not saying anything that's a revelation here. But you're right. We need to do a better job in the future.
And I think on that note, we can, we'll close the agenda item 2. I do just want to mention that I do want to see some future discussion on the ministerial impact fees. I didn't know we could add that into that process. And so that's encouraging to me that we can address that, within that ministerial process. I know that was one of the concerns we I think all had about a portion of that moving to that process, but knowing that the impact fees, those will not be lost with the ministerial process. That's good to hear. So, okay, we'll go ahead and introduce our third item today, which is still a study session for discussion. And this is the focus general plan update with the land use map. And so we'll go ahead and start with our staff report from Ms. Thompson. Thank you.
All right, and this is another study session where no action is being requested of the commission, so no final decisions are being requested. But this is the general plan land use maps. As part of the general plan update, we've updated all of the figures in the general plan and updated the color scheme of the land use map. We have not intended to change any of the land use designations in the map. However, the city did not have a parcel specific database at the start of the general plan update process, nor did we have the map in GIS. We had the map in the city's current general plan, which is kind of a photocopied lower quality map. So what we want to ensure is that the map, that there are no mapping errors being carried forward where we just, where a line may cover a parcel and we apply the incorrect designation. So we just wanted to get your input. We've gone through it a couple of times. We think it's in pretty good shape, but want to make sure that you've looked at it and don't see any errors or questions that we should be looking at before moving forward with updating all of the other general plan land use maps to, or all of the other maps that include the land use components in the general plan. Share that on the screen. So you have a series of maps in front of you. You have two maps that are the adopted general plan land use map. Those are, I think, attachments A. Yeah, one A and 1B are the adopted land use map, including a close-up of the downtown policy area. Attachment 2 is the draft land use map. And then attachment 3 was that larger scale version of the land use map so that you could really see what was going on. So we've got those. Attachment 2 is what would be put in the general plan. And then attachment 3 is the close-up. We anticipate having something like that hanging at City Hall. So when people come in and want to see what their land use is, they can just take a look at the map and see what it is, and it'll be pretty easy for people to use. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll also share the screen once again so that people can see what we're discussing.
I have, Michael, I think you have some questions. I have a lot of questions on it.
Define special planning area.
So special planning areas are called out in the land use element. So there's a close-up of each special planning area in the land use element, and there's a series of policies and requirements that govern the development of that special planning area.
Okay, and those are in place right now?
Correct. Yeah, we're not
Place.
creating any new ones.
Okay, heavy industrial, light industrial. I don't see the color change here, where exactly
The-
heavy is.
Let me pop open this and see if everyone. Oh, sorry, let's see that huge. Let me get this over there. There we go. So looking at this, you'll see we've got the heavy industrial up here outside of the city limits. And then within the city limits, where we've got the light industrial, we have, I think it's a Caltrans facility. Let's see, right about here. And I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit to show you that. We have lands that are designated future growth area outside of the city. Some of the lands that are designated for surface mining, but not a lot of specific industrial lands. So here, I'll zoom in even more here. And so this would be the light industrial right here. These are all of these have a land use designation that's identified in the land use element. And those were 2 study sessions ago that we went through those.
Okay, I mean, can you point, I mean, like I said, I don't think I'm colorblind, but I don't see. Did somebody point that out to
So
me?
can you see on here? Light industrial where I'm.
Right there,
circling?
right there?
Right there, yes.
Okay,
And then north and west of the city.
yellow?
No, it's the light purple, and apparently we need to come up with some new color. So
Oh,
just off of Marlette.
just really small there.
Yeah, it's very small.
Yeah.
one, Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Yeah.
really, I think it's really
Okay.
hard to see.
One of the things that, I looked at this map, I think I picked it up from Janice, I think on Thursday, whatever it was. But anyway, I looked at this map, I looked at it with my little magnifying glass with the lights on it and looked it over. One of the things that I would have liked to seen or hear about, and maybe it was, but anybody ever checked with Chief Mackey about about this map and making sure that the Ione Fire Department can respond to everything that this map is proposing? Okay, the cops, they drive around, so I wouldn't worry too much about them. They don't sit in their office until they get a call. They're out cruising around. But fire, they sit at the house, and we got an emergency, they get in their trucks and go. I don't know if anybody has noticed how bad the traffic has been lately. I mean, it has been terrible.
How can you not notice?
I mean, no, I know, so, it just, I don't know why, but I'd sure like to hear from the chief what he thinks about laying this, taking this map and making it. I mean, the residents of Ione, they deserve that much consideration on making sure, 10 seconds could be a matter of life or death. And again, the way the traffic is, my God, the other day, I don't know how long it took us to get out of the shopping center. And then now we got this, that Chevron sign. I'm sure everybody's heard about that. You can't make a right-hand turn without sticking the nose of your vehicle out in the traffic. And you got people making a left-hand turn. They're just, they want to get home and what have you. I mean, it's terrible. Not to get off the beaten track, but shouldn't have they come to the planning commission for that sign?
Jeff is very familiar with that issue, as he's gotten some questions about it. He can answer that question.
Yeah.
The issue on the fire chief, look, every project that comes before the city is reviewed by all the staff in every department when it comes for an actual project. These are just zoning areas in the general plan. So it just means you can build certain things in those zones. But when we actually get an application for a project, the fire chief does review that and he signs every single one of those projects off. So he's well aware of what's happening. And he has a lot of requirements as well when he signs off those projects. And it's usually the fire department that has the most requirements in terms of brand new projects that are under review for a project application. So the answer is yes, Chief Mackey does see every single project that comes forward.
Okay, and that answers the question, but what it doesn't answer the question, has he seen, remarked, or okayed, or
So
any comment on this
So
map?
related, there are no changes to this map. This is intended to be the city's currently adopted map that was adopted in 2009 that we've recreated. So no changes are being proposed. So it's not being circulated for a new environmental impact report. If we were doing a general plan update that involved map changes, then that goes to all the departments and they weigh in.
Right.
But when we're not making those map changes, then that was addressed in the 2009 EIR, which gets reviewed and implemented, as well as all of the individual departments implementing their individual comments when we go through that.
So everything we see here it goes back to 2009?
Correct. Any changes that were made since 2009, any general plan amendments would be reflected, but I don't believe there have been any. So I think this is identical to 2009. So there are no changes, and that's what we wanted to stress is that we're continuing. So the city received an SB2 grant to update its general plan and to do a focused general plan update. The grant doesn't include an environmental impact report. It doesn't include a really heavy lift in terms of an update, but more of a streamlined update. So we made a lot of revisions to bring the element into compliance with state law related to wildfire flooding, a lot of safety provisions to address some of the changes in state law related to circulation, and then to kind of refine and streamline the element. But it's not anticipated to increase the development capacity in the city. So that's staying the same as it was when the city adopted its general plan back in 2009.
Could I jump in here, Mike? Where to start? First of all, you mentioned like having this on the wall so people know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is really different than the current zoning map.
That's.
So it should be very similar to the current zoning map.
Boy, I don't know where to start. There are just areas all over that are completely different. I'll just throw in two. The high density housing area up on Waterman. On this thing, this policy bit is roughly doubled in size from what it is on the current zoning. Here's another one. The downtown transition zone. On this map, this downtown policy, it extends. Does everybody here know where Mr. Rhodes lives?
No.
It extends from his house across the creek, clear to Highway 124. That's, I mean, on the map, it looks like it's contiguous, but that is cut off by the creek. And I don't think there's any bridges proposed. What that would do is basically a commercial transition, which discourages single-family homes, et cetera, encourages businesses. That makes an island up, way up 124 at the end of the housing. And that's not the way that that's zoned now.
This area right here. Is that what you're discussing?
I'm not sure where you're pointing.
Oh, well, let's see.
Oh, there.
There you, yeah,
Right there.
there you
That
go.
area, exactly.
Yeah,
Got a little arrow now, yeah.
that's on our zoning, that's low density, single family housing.
Okay.
It's not. Now, here's my question, and I could go on. There's a number of really significant things like that.
Okay.
I got on the county or on the city planning commission in 2010. I can't believe I've been here for 12 years, but it was the year after this came out. And part of the reason, I mean, I don't want to be a not in my backyard kind of guy, but part of the reason I applied was I saw that commercial transition thing up on 124. That's just up from me. And it just didn't make sense. Subsequently, over the years, when I've asked about that, everybody says, no, that's not what it's zoned, and all the maps, the zoning maps, that's not what it is. And after 12 years, now I see what I saw back then, and I never saw again. I can go around town, there's a number of places. There's some parks that aren't included in public service, like Rover Park. What I'm wondering, first of all, if you put this on the wall and somebody relies on it as to what they can do with their property, there's gonna be some major problem. But what I'm wondering, and maybe I should wait until after public comment, this is probably going beyond questions, but I'm wondering if we could throw this whole thing away. I mean, it's a policy bit, but it doesn't conform to our current zoning. And to try to avoid, I don't want to do like what you were saying, spend a whole lot of money or anything, but if we could just substitute for this, the current zoning map.
So typically when a general plan is updated, the zoning map should have been updated following it. And in Ione's case, after the general plan was updated in 2009, the zoning map was never updated following that. But what we can do is go through and highlight all of the parcels where there's an inconsistency and make some recommendations. What we don't want to do is increase the capacity of the general plan. So if we're maintaining general plan designations that are consistent with the current zoning, that wouldn't probably result in any increases in capacity. And then also for the area you're discussing, the downtown transition area, we also have to go and look at the downtown plan because that modified the zoning and that includes regulations for the downtown plan that are,
I can guarantee you
we'll-
the downtown
we'll double
plan
check
doesn't
that.
go to the other side of the creek.
I don't think it does. Yeah, I think the limits are downtown, but I just want to make sure that that didn't get tagged in there. So we can do a double check and go back and forth between the two documents and then come back to you when we bring the general plan back with a assessment of where there is the potential for changes.
So basically, you would look and see where you could make this conform to the actual current zoning?
We could, or where the zoning could conform to this, kind of would depend on the use and the situation on a case by case basis. But yeah, where it makes no sense, where you have a downtown transition area that extends outside of downtown, that would make sense to not increase it. So yeah, we can, and I think that's something that the commission's going to want to weigh in on any of those changes.
I look at this, the attachment 1B, and I keep seeing this one word downtown policy area. And this to me looks like all policy, but it's not reality. Not just that it isn't the way it is zoned, but it doesn't make sense like this. So, yeah, I mean, if we can make this conform to what's currently actually there, I think we'd be in much better shape.
Okay, yeah, well, we can take a look at that. And we can also take a look at correcting parks or anything that have never been rezoned in the past to make sure that they're designated correctly.
Okay.
And one more question, what is public service area?
What do you mean? It's the city government owned property or county government owned property or state government property.
Yeah,
That's what the zoning is.
Nothing on it and it's there and.
Well, most of them are developed,
You have the school.
right? Anything that's
you have the
government,
VFW hall, you
Yeah.
have the park.
right?
That's
Yeah.
all in the blue. And as far as the school, I mean, that's in blue and that's our zoning and we don't have to change that. But that's another issue.
No, don't go there tonight, but
Yeah, we're trying to talk about that. Yeah, I guess I do want to take a pause about, I'm not comfortable with I guess what we need to do, there's parks that aren't zoned, we need to have those zoned correctly, but I'm not comfortable with changing things, we need to work with what the zoning is, so I know this is just an issue that Commissioner Gephardt has raised time and time again on the discrepancies that happen with the maps. It always seems like this is what happens. And so, I do think that we need to just stick with our starting point, which is our zoning map. And this is what it is. And we're committed to that. I don't want things to kind of get segued through with this process. I think that's what undermines some of the process that we're all trying to adhere to. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that the zoning map is what exists. We're not looking to make changes to that. We want things to conform to that is the ideal. So
I'll just throw this into. This happened before, Beth, before you and your company were here. This was I've said his name many times. I don't need to say it again, but it was
An
a
inherited map.
prior city planner who often overextended himself.
well, but to be clear, we can, and Beth has already said this, we can fix inconsistencies that
Right.
that don't make sense. And that's the whole point of having this meeting tonight is to look at the map and make sure it's correct. And that it is consistent with what the zoning is. And we wanted you to say that tonight. We want to get this right. Bring it back to you for final approval or recommendations to the council. And that's okay. That's exactly what we want to do tonight.
Beth, what's rather than spend any extra time trying to conform this to the zoning map, why can't you just throw this out and put in the zoning map?
Well, then we would have to pretty much throw out your general plan. And so the general plan.
No, we
is
can't
your-
do that,
right.
Mark.
Yeah, the general
Yeah.
plan is
Just
kind of
asking.
your broad document and your zoning is
Yeah,
actually supposed to fall
two
under and
different
align
things.
with your general plan. So your general plan provides that direction. What we can do is find where there are errors or discrepancies. And it may be simple too to use consistent terms between the two documents because a lot of times
Yeah,
some
would make
jurisdictions
sense.
like having completely separate names. Some like having consistent names, so we can name them consistently, so you don't have M2 on one document and light industrial on another, so.
No, that drives me bananas.
does.
Yeah, I
And-
mean,
and-
some, the same area, some say downtown transition, some say commercial transition.
Right,
No, we need to stop doing that.
Thank you.
I've lived through too many cities and general plans that the only people that know what it says are the experts, and that doesn't do anybody any good except for the experts.
That's all I have.
May I ask, how did, and I don't want to get off the beaten track, but how did this Waterman thing explode? How did that?
Well, I mean, this was put on in 2009. I have no idea. I mean, how did it double in size
Mhm.
from what's actually zoned to this?
Exactly.
You'd have to, Joe, you were on the planning committee. Weren't you?
I'm having a hard time remembering what I had for breakfast.
It's a while ago, but Mike, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. We gotta keep that in check.
No, I'm totally surprised that there's a major difference. I don't know how that could happen.
Well, we can bring this back after Beth
Yeah.
takes a look at it for the next commission meeting in a month.
yes, what we'll do is bring back just the map rather than bringing back the general plan, and that way we can go
Right.
through, because we have a whole bunch of maps that will be based on this, so we'll go through and identify those fixes and make it hopefully in alignment, and
Don't we have a zoning map? It's like this big.
we do.
Yeah, I think it's
See detail.
right in the front, isn't it? Yeah,
Yes.
we're gonna need a new one of those.
Yes, if there are changes that need to be made to the zoning map as a result of this, we'll try to address both simultaneously.
But that should address all of your concerns, Mark, if it's done right. But if you see anything after we bring it back to you the next time, please
Oh, look,
let us know, because we're not trying to, do anything. A lot of this goes way back to 2009.
I think all of it does.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Okay, so we've had some board discussion. We are going to go ahead and take some public comment on regards to the zoning map.
Jerry Thomas, 125 Maple Street. Assuming I was a year off, I was guessing 2010, but it was around in the June, third. And a little clarification on your map. I think that was Caltrans and the old Ione Depot yard were in light purple of all colors. I think it was Caltrans, and then that was the old Depot yard, which doesn't exist there anymore. Looked like it was on Depot Road. But back to that, was it a brown area on your new map? That map's terrible. But let's just call it a brown area that's over by Waterman Road. In the general plan meeting of about 2009, you're saying it was, I made a comment. They tried to put high density housing across the creek from me. And I said, you're putting it exactly wrong. I didn't want Preston to shut down, was my comment. But if it does, I would like to have it as a junior college, was my comments. And the city council flipped and did exactly just that. So they put high density over there by where Preston or a junior college would be a good site for. So that's why I think the brown exists over there along Waterman Road. And I'm sorry about that, but that's what I think is the history of that. They flipped at that time and put it there instead of across the creek from Larry and I. Yeah, that attachment too, I think that was Depot Road, Caltrans and everything else. And the circulation is one of the elements of the general plan. I was a planning commissioner years ago. And I had the honors of putting Joe Wiley there years ago, in 2004.
I've never forgiven you either.
So you too, amen. that, the churchgoer. But anyway, the circulation and so forth has been very bad around here for way past even beginning all that. We had a corner of a park cut off. We were hopeful that we were gonna get 3 lanes, a turn lane into the market, and even going up to Shakely Lane and everything else so far. So I don't know if you're discussing that in the general plan, but circulation through here has been terrible and so forth for probably 40 years. So, and trying to get a fire truck, ambulance, and police services, and trying to get a bypass through here. We had a bypass in 97 when I got on, I'd say, is when the bypass was made, and then it was changed. So I don't know if we even really have a bypass in the offerings, but in 97, 20 years later, 2017, what we did, we just added more prison instead of taking care of what we had, so. But that blue part you're talking about, that's schools, that's prisons, that's also CAL FIRE. It's it's Old Preston and everything else where you have the opportunity to cite a junior college or something like that, so. You have a lot of good resources here in Ione, but that map just sucks, I'll just say. It's hard to figure out, it's too small, you can't really see the detail of the street.
No, I want to squinch
And
it
I
out.
did it with a bigger map, and thank you for that comment, Joe.
Our customer loves me. Yeah, if you guys can kind of clean up the downtown area, I have 2 properties in the downtown area, and it's really sketchy. I mean, I'm across the street from Mark over here, and he's completely different, zone different than I am. Everybody around me is zone different than I am right over here on 111. And I have another property down on Church Street, and right across the street is zoned differently than my side of the street. But the main thoroughfare is going through town, kind of, this uniformity going, so it's kind of choppy. I mean, it just depends on, it looks like somebody carved out little pieces here and there, where they wanted something to be. Just kind of, go back and look over things and just a little uniformity. Nice.
That property across from me, I think the reason that was earmarked, one time you're talking about making a post office. Putting the street across, road across the bridge. I wonder if that's what that was.
Maybe.
Back then.
Yeah, I forgotten all about that.
Yeah, heard that. Oh. Okay, so if we don't have any further public comments, are there any further discussion as a board? Okay, at this time, we'll go ahead and close the meeting and appreciate everyone's.
Before we close real quick, the sign thing at the Chevron station,
Oh, sorry, we didn't discuss that. Yeah.
little intel on that?
Okay, so I had actually received a public comment regarding that Chevron sign, and
Yes.
so I actually went out and visited the sign and kind of walked around and looked at it, took some pictures and whatnot, and I could certainly send that email out with the pictures and whatnot if need be. But as far as the gas price signs, they're exempt without limitations from 1742, the signs on private property within our zoning code. Provided that it's outside the clear view triangle, which is the 20-foot by 20-foot at corners of intersections. And then outside the Caltrans right away. And then provided that it's consistent with all applicable state laws. So initially looking at it, it appears to be consistent with that clear view triangle. So it is consistent with our zoning code. As far as, my review, went.
But so it's blocking the driver's view and it's just gonna stay there like that?
At least when I went out there, pulling to the right shoulder lane, turning right, there was a little, it might have been a little blocked, but it was outside that Clearview triangle. So as far as the code is concerned,
Yeah,
it is
but,
outside the,
code's one thing, but
Yeah.
public safety is another. I
Right.
mean, you gotta, so that doesn't make any sense, and they changed the sign, so I can't believe that it didn't come across.
Yeah, there was- there was
changed.
no sign permit. Not as far as I'm aware.
No, well, we were never told, and they moved it and
Yeah, I'm saying
changed
it
it.
was exempt.
It would never came in front of us.
Yeah.
Remember all the big deal with the electronic sign at the,
Mhm.
okay, that came, but there's been no signs come across us.
We'll look into it, but I believe what Jeff explained was that sign is exempt. And
Mm.
so there.
The gas
there may not
price.
be a-
Yeah, that's specifically the gas price
But
sign.
how
yeah.
can something that is it can cause I mean, do we need another lawsuit? I mean, because that's exactly what's gonna happen. The city's gonna get sued, Chevron's gonna get sued, and everybody else. Worst scenario, somebody's gonna get killed. You can't even see somebody walking to the right. You can't, so, we need, again, the Ione taxpayer deserves more, and, try to reason with the people. Now I see that they have sheetrock. If they hadn't blocked off the bottom of the sign, okay, you could see through the sign, just like the Shell station. So, I mean,
It is an
Not
issue
good.
because you have to drive past the white line.
yeah,
for the pedestrian
definitely.
to be able to see the
It
sign.
was, yeah, and then,
That's what I do, and if you could hit.
yeah.
So we'll look into it and get back
That's
to you
bad.
on that.
Something's gotta be done. I mean,
Narrow.
There's another way to look at this because it is exempt under the zoning. But it's not exempt from a traffic safety committee review when we can do that. And that is a committee that is made up of the police chief, the fire chief, the city manager, and the public works director. So we can look at that from that point of view. We can look at all the traffic data for that intersection, see how many collisions we have. We base our information on facts. Are there accidents? Are there collisions? Are there injuries? Are there, we can look at all of that and we can determine whether there's an issue there or not. And we can do our own independent review, just as Jeff has already done. We can go out there again and look at what we call them site distance issues. That's how we the terminology we use for traffic studies. So if there are site distance issues that are of major concern from a traffic safety point of view, that's a different issue than whether they're exempt or not. They're exempt. We can't really fix that, but we can appeal to their better nature on a traffic safety, or we can do something else to the intersection to make it more safe. So we can look at it from that point of view.
Yeah, that's gotta be looked into.
All traffic, they'll inspect. And they can tell anybody.
Well, it is a state route. That's true. It's a state road and they have every right to look at it from a traffic safety point of view. That's absolutely true. We can look at it because the side streets are ours, but it is a state route. So we probably should both look at it together.
Yeah, can we do, I know you've been working on that intersection for some time. Am I not correct? Trying to get data to kind of push Caltrans to allow us to do something different?
Well, yes, the answer is yes. So there's a couple things that are happening. One is we're kind of waiting to see if there is going to actually be an application. There is no application. There is no project at Waterman Road. Let's be very clear about that. There's no application, which means there's no project. Now, they might submit an application any day for all we know, but it's been quite a while since I've talked to them. It's been at least 4 months since I've had any conversations with them. So we don't know exactly what they're up to. But if there is a project there, that would trigger an automatic review of that entire intersection. In other words, there could be major changes to that intersection based on this project. And if, and only if the project's approved, they would most likely be required to make changes to that intersection. Just because of the sheer number of residents that would live there, would have enough of a traffic impact on that intersection that it would require major changes to it. So, but that doesn't mean we have to wait for that, because that could take a long time. We can do a traffic study investigation right now through the traffic committee.
When they were putting in the second prison out there, of course, they did a major traffic study all around town. And I know that intersection, I forget now, but they have a grading system, isn't it like 1 through 5 or something like that?
A through F.
Right, okay.
Yeah. F being a street that is failing in terms of
Right.
traffic,
And that,
congestion.
right, that intersection, 124, 104 Shakely Lane right there by the Standard Station was right smack on the bubble. It was as bad as it could be without requiring something different. So of course they did nothing different.
Right.
What I'm saying is, aside from the Waterman project, since then, how many houses have gone in up around the golf course in that whole area? I
Right.
mean, to me, just figuring those numbers in might be enough to, it's pushing Caltrans and trying to convince them of something. I understand that, which is not easy. But it seems to me like the numbers, especially if you look at that past traffic study, which was the last big one they did.
Yeah.
We may be over it now. Just
Any
because of-
any new project that comes forward anywhere near that intersection is going to trigger a major traffic study.
Right.
And will most likely require some changes to that intersection. That's just based on the traffic flows we already have.
But
And
and this is kind of what I'm asking, there have been a whole lot of houses built since then.
a mile up the street at Castle Oaks, yes.
Yeah. So,
Right.
but
The
that,
problem is it's not close enough that we can force them into a nexus traffic study.
oh, okay.
But that's why I say any new project that comes forward is going to probably trigger some major changes. And the other thing I just wanted to say, because I think it was Gary that was asking about the alternate truck route, also known as Wireless project. It is still on the books. There is funding through ACTC. We're not going to let that go. We're going back to ACTC for further funding. And hopefully soon, we go back to the city council for adoption of the final route for that alternative truck route. The biggest problem is the trucks. Yes, cars are a problem, but the bigger problem is that trucks slow down everybody else. And so it's the truck traffic. If we have a truck route in place, the traffic flows will actually be much better. They are slowing everyone down. Every time they go through those intersections, it is much slower than regular cars, right? Because they can move along a lot quicker. So that's a bigger problem. I mean, the overall traffic counts, I do believe are a problem as well, but I actually think that the truck and the amount of trucks is staggering right now. And so we are working on that. I hope that we get back to the council early next year with the actual recommendations from the city engineer on that exact route that should be, and we'll give the council several routes to look at and ask them to choose one and then move forward through ACTC and get all of the funding in place. Yeah, no, we're not going to let it go. Yeah, I know. And it's just, they keep hitting the building every time they turn the corner. It's insane. And I'm not trying to be dramatic, but how many times have they hit the buildings trying to just make a normal turn? It's not a normal turn. It's not a truck route turn. The problem is it was never designed that way. It was never designed for trucks to make that turn.
So
Yeah,
I have just 2 more items to update the commission on.
absolutely.
So we have received 2 applications that will come before the planning commission for approval once they're deemed complete. We have the one for 31 East Main, which is the hotel project. And that it's not a complete application yet. So we're sending comments back and asking them to provide more information. And then we also have a boundary line adjustment request So
Okay.
both of those, once we have a complete application and have finished reviewing it with the departments, those projects will come before you.
Boundary line, for what?
It's 8 and 10 Welch Lane. And so just to adjust the boundary between two lots,
Oh, nothing commercial.
No,
Oh,
two
good.
existing lots, just an adjustment of the
Oh,
boundary
okay.
line. Not
Okay.
not a development proposal that is currently in part of that, just the
No.
adjustment.
Is that the currently Smiley property?
That's my only
Oh, Okay.
Okay, and then we're planning on a January meeting, as far as we know.
We are planning on a
Yeah,
January meeting.
We should
More-
have
more
some
about fun.
items.
Yes.
Yeah, we definitely have items. Yeah.
Good, good. Okay, well, appreciate everyone's comments today and everyone's time. Thank you so much. Meeting adjourned.
Hey, Mike, let me ask you this.
Probably 40 below.
Oh my gosh, I know. I was like, I'm bringing a big jacket.
If you'd have seen the golf, you could have gone skiing.
You know what? It was so frozen this morning. I know.
Outage in your zip code. My wife just texted me, we have no internet for the last,
Traffic is
it looks like it's gonna.
from over by the school to over by the.
Well, at least it's not the
I
power
have
and
to
it's just
have
the
it
internet.
connected To my school right here.
I don't know.
Can't
I'm gonna have to go plug in the generator.
just drive 5 minutes. It's like, it's a drive now. And you just don't even know what traffic is gonna be
Central.
on your way through. I mean, it's just, you just don't even know. And I've got, one kid up at the high school and, that
Mine
traffic
goes
up
into
there is
the
cuckoo too, like trying to get out of our lot and I mean, there's a lot of bad traffic areas. but
Absolutely not.
I do agree though, that the volume is part of it.
They already, 20 years, 20.
Yeah.
So we figured out that.
Oh, yeah, it's not even this, I mean, in the time, we bought our first house here in like 2003. This house now in 2023, and it's like the difference in the traffic is
Oh, I
just,
know.
it's like
I see all of these maps.
unreal.
That's-
Anyways, well, you guys, happy holidays.
Take care. Yeah, Merry Christmas,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank you.
There's the down.
Yeah, no, there's.